next session that we have is on ESG 360 degree, assessing, understanding, and improving your ESG performance from GRC to CSR to ESG, threading strategies, navigating through the ESG reporting requirements, and how finance is driving sustainable business practices, embedding sustainability across your supply chain. Well, our moderator for this session is Mr. Sameet Gambhir, Vice President, Corporate Law and Company Secretary, DCM Shriram Limited. May I please request Mr. Sameet to please be present on the stage as we start inviting everybody else. Talking about Mr. Sameet Gambhir, a quick introduction. He is an FCS LLB, a senior corporate legal professional and company secretary with over 30 years of experience in the industry. Presently, he is the VP, as we just mentioned, and his expertise includes regulatory, corporate legal matters, corporate governance and compliances, corporate restructuring, M&A, RBI and FEMA matters, ESG, SEBI regulations, and if I will continue, probably we'll take another 2 or 3 minutes because his list of credentials is like huge. And he's also done a leadership effectiveness program from IIM Bangalore as well. Next on, we would like to invite Mr. Shujath bin Ali, who is the Global General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Sustainability Limited. Welcome, sir. A graduate in Commerce and Law, he has done Masters in Law in Alternate Dispute Resolution and International Commercial Arbitration. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, and he's attended executive education programs in strategy, general management, and leadership from Harvard University. He was also a member of the Toastmasters International and has led various initiatives in the development of leadership and communication skills for professionals and students. We're so happy to have you here. And may I also say that he's got over 21 years of experience in the areas of governance, compliance, risk management, corporate, commercial, and employment laws. Next on, we have Ms. Suhana Islam Murshedd, who is partner Khaitan and Company. She has over 16 years of experience as corporate lawyer and specializes in mergers and acquisitions, private equity investments, strategic alliances. She advises on all aspects of Indian corporate and commercial laws, including Indian exchange control regulations and information technology laws. She specializes in corporate governance and leads the ESG practice group in her firm. She is also an independent director in several listed companies. We're so happy to have you here, Suhana. Welcome on board. And next on is Amber Gupta. He is welcome on stage. So, Mr. Amber Gupta is the head corporate legal, company secretary, and compliance officer, Aditya Birla Capital. He's responsible for ensuring compliances with all corporate laws encompassing SEBI, RBI, FEMA, MCA, IT laws and listing regulations and investors applicable to Aditya Birla Capital Limited. He is a law graduate, he's a member of ICSI, and he is a member of the CIARB, that is the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Okay, and with this, I hand over this forum to Mr. Sameet to please take over and navigate the waters that we are talking about in ESG. A warm welcome again, everybody. Thank you.
Thank
it's
you
all
very
yours,
much,
sir.
And a very good morning to all of you. I think the stage has already been set. There's a lot of questions. We were actually, talking about the ESG and all, and I think I was actually thinking whether we'll have a session or not, because the session could continue in ESG as well. So I think ESG, whether you call it a buzzword or it's a new normal, I mean, there's a lot of, somebody was saying that it's a game changer. Actually, it could be a game changer, frankly. And, everyone is talking about ESG today in the corporate world. I still remember that in India, we don't see this, it's an old concept. Its concept is probably not very old. It's very, very old in India. But, the term is new. The awareness is new, I think I would say. I still remember we used to talk a lot about people, planet and all, and we used to talk about sustainability. We have seen the time where there was sustainability investing. We have seen the time where there was reasonably, sustainably investing. So I think everything is already there, but this term was coined, and I think in 2004 or 5, if I'm not wrong, United Nations published a report called Who Cares When? And that report was endorsed by around 40 financial institutions with around a lot of money in their kitty. And then they started saying that, we actually have to integrate all these things, non-financial parameters into financial parameters before we analyze a company and before we actually do some analysis for the organization. not merely financial parameters will be good enough to understand a company. However, if you really see, the doctrine of Milton Friedman was is a Nobel Prize winner. He was a US economist. He always used to say that, the only social responsibility of a company is to maximize the wealth for the shareholders. While in ESG, we're not talking about the shareholder, we're talking about the stakeholder inclusion and all. Some people say that, this is something which is against the Friedman laws. Some says, no, this is actually the intent is the same. Why? Because ultimately, if you're doing good in ESG, if you are giving a maximum value to your stakeholder in ESG, ultimately, who is going to get benefited? Your shareholder is going to get benefited. So that statement gets true. So all this is happening. There's a lot of critics. There's a lot of controversy happening around this subject at the same time. But I think the concept is really, really good. If you personally ask me, it's a very, very good concept because everyone has to do something. And more particularly now, the corporate has to do a little bit or a bit about their, the social things, the environment thing, the governance things. We have been talking about governance a lot since the time of Enron. We have been talking a lot about corporate governance. So I think in bits and parts, we have been talking about planet always. We have been talking about social responsibilities always. We have been talking about governance always. But this term was coined in 2004-5 by the UN when they endorsed this report, and it was decided that let us call it ESG or environment, social, and governance. And these norms should be there in the when you actually analyze the report of a company or when you actually see the organization. Frankly, our Prime Minister has given a very good nara, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. I think it's a very, very heavy statement they have given because ultimately you have to take all the people along, and that's the social responsibility. So I think thereafter the CSR came into India. That talks about a lot about the social responsibility. Corporate governance, we've always been talking. SEBI has given so much to listed companies, and Companies Act also given so much to other companies also to talk about as a corporate governance. But where does ESG stands? That's a question right now. And we're still talking about whether it's a good thing, whether it's something which should be imposed on the organization, whether there should be any regulatory framework around this. Now people are saying that, there's a kind of a race in the ESG also, we are saying. Why? Because data is being taken from the public domain. They are ranking you or rating you on the basis of your ESG score. You don't know where they are taking data. They are taking data from public domain. So there is no legal framework. So there's a term called greenwashing now. And there's a lot of contradiction around that. Why greenwashing? Because people in the race of ESG are giving a lot of data which is misleading data because they wanted to, be on the number one, number two kind of a thing. And then there's a concept of investing and green bond, etc. So I think we'll have questions, we'll have answer of all these questions because we have expert panel here, wonderful expert panel. Shujath is an old good friend. He is a General Counsel of Sustainability and he has been working in sustainability in law. And I think we'll have all answers from him also regarding sustainability. Suhana is a partner with Khaitan and Co. And she has almost more than 15 years of experience. And she is handling the practice of ESG also. So we'll understand that how do the company or the consultants are actually advising the clients, to making the ESG compliant or to advising in terms of ESG, etc. Amber is again GC of Aditya Birla Capital, and they are doing a lot of work in ESG as we understand as a group. So I think the contest which we set and the questions which we have in mind, I think we'll have all the answers from all these expert panels, I'm sure. So Sujath, I just wanted to come to you first. You think when we say that, if you need a better future, you need to behave responsible today. Ye sab bolte hain aaj ki date mein. So what do you think how the Indian industry is, adopting the ESG number one? Are they actually adopting in a very positive manner or there are still challenges, sacrificing one thing to adopt other things kind of a thing? So what is your overall view on the ESG and, in terms of keeping in view the Indian economy or global economy? So how are people adopting it actually?
Yeah, see, if you see from Indian company standpoint, we can always, divide into multiple buckets. I mean, that is definitely there. You have one set of organizations which are subsidiaries of a global multinational corporations. Right. That organizations behave in a different manner. We'll come to it. Then second, of course, we have a listed companies as well. And third, who are not into any of these buckets. So, I mean, there is no doubt that, of course, you really mentioned about the context. I mean, we've spent some time in some similar panels. I mean, is it an old wine in a new bottle, right? And you gave it very nicely. We talked about governance. Pehle corporate governance hua karta tha. Then we talked about GRC. CSR was again corporate citizenship. We talked about a lot. And of course, triple P and all of that stuff also we talked about. The concepts were all there. I think what really changed is the stakeholders' expectations. I think now the investors, the shareholders are really demanding the non-financial parameters as well. The private equity, venture capitals, they are very keenly looking into these parameters. The banks and financial institutions as well, for all credit ratings and all, are very keen on this aspect. More importantly, the community, the society which you are working with. I mean, if you are running a hazardous industry, the community are really expecting a proper behavior, from the particular organization. And of course, from a product and services standpoint, the customers are really being more conscious with respect to how an organization is using its natural resources. And of course, you can see a lot of labeling. So broadly, what has changed is the expectations of all the stakeholders, and that has really, given a lot of impetus, and in a kind of way that it kind of forced the organizations to really look ESG as a framework. So that is something what we see. And of course, in the global organizations, because of some of the reporting frameworks in Europe, I mean, we see a faster adaptation of ESG frameworks, ESG goals in the global organizations. And of course, followed by that in the Indian, companies, I think top 1,000 listed companies, have to, publish BRSR report. That is also driving them. But of course, there were some companies, from the beginning, who were strong in terms of, processes and ethical and all. They have been following it. I mean, if you see some of the top, 10 companies, 50 companies, they've been, publishing the sustainability report and corporate citizenship report and so on and so forth. So I think that's the, kind of an approach. I mean, different, sector of a company are following a different way of adoption, which definitely slow. Some are doing because they want to do it, and some of them are possibly trying to do because they have to do it. So again, it's the important role of professionals like us to really show that why it is a value addition. I mean, our previous panel did also talked about governance premium, ethics premium and all. I think ESG also attracts a lot of premium as long as that adds really, value to the overall proposition. So I think these are some of the initial remarks, Sameet. I will definitely, add more, as we go on, and possibly should take more questions as well.
No, definitely, Shujath. That's what is, it was really, really great opening remarks about the ESG, because a lot of people are facing different challenges. It all depends on the size of organization. It all depends on the, dynamics of the organization and all. But if I go back to Suhana now, Suhana is, on the other side of profession, they are into advisory side. And I am told that, there are a lot of people, a lot of firms have a ESG practice now. So what do you think? One is that, BRSR is now mandatory for only top 1,000 listed entity. That is one area where people are facing challenges, how to comply with that. There's a lot of things which people are even not able to understand. So how do you think that, what kind of advice you are giving to your clients in terms of compliance, not only in terms of compliance, but, other value addition in terms of ESG, and what exactly you think that, the clients are facing the challenges in terms of ESG, Suhana?
Thanks, Sameet. So just before I delve into the question, I think I just want to echo what Shujath also said, because the BRSR, which is the Business Sustainability and Responsibility Report, and it's a tongue twister, I know, but the BRSR is mandatory for listed companies. But like he mentioned, we see a lot amongst our client group, a lot of such companies which don't fall into this bracket still do it on a voluntary basis. Again, for reasons we've spoken about, mostly because of your investor demand and also for your consumers and your employees. With the BRSR in particular, we see a lot of, we as a law firm, we have a large ESG practice, and we are obviously not into the auditing or consulting side, right? Because we don't do and come and do the number crunching. But a lot of value addition that lawyers and the legal fraternity and the in-house legal teams can do is to sort of vet the BRSR and your sustainability reports from a legal lens. And that becomes increasingly important in the, in the present circumstances with the rise in stakeholder activism like we spoke about. Whether we talk about cases overseas, which is more prevalent. For example, we've seen the ExxonMobil case where a hedge fund had directors put up in the board. Or we see cases where there was a chocolate company in which people started asking questions like, do you use child labor in your supply chain, in your cocoa plantations? So items like this, need a legal sort of vetting through, because the BRSR is not only number crunching, it is also qualitative assessments, qualitative disclosures that you need to make. Taking it, one line ahead, the sustainability report, like most companies would have their own sustainability reports now. And the aspirational statements that we make in those reports are something that also need to be checked. And, in terms of, for example, even in the BRSR questions like, what is your reporting boundary? How much do you extend your reporting boundary to? What are the entities or factories that you cover? What do you understand by materiality? Who are your key material stakeholders? So one way we can do it is say, for example, take a legal implication of how material or not material a particular grievance is. So that gives it a bit of a more objective test as well. So these are the kind of questions we grapple with, that clients come to us with respect to the BRSR.
Thanks, Suhana. I think you are absolutely right. I think we have to understand that there's a role of legal counsel definitely there in ESG. While, initially we were all thinking that it's a part of sustainability team, it's a business team, it's a financial team. But eventually when we started, recently I was reading that SEC in US has constituted a task force to scrutinize the reports, ESG reports, so that if there is a misleading data, is there a greenwashing happening or not? That's where I see there is a role of a legal counsel. In-house counsel is very, very important. Who better than us can advise the board or advise the people that, this is something which is a governance. You can't give a report. You can't give a data which is not authentic. You can't give a data which is, a misleading data. And that has to start, there has to be kind of a legal framework in the organization that has to start from the board level, I think, from the top level. People were also saying, in the last session also. I think it's very, very important to create an awareness among the board of directors that if you are actually serious about it, then be serious about it. It will not go that in the race of doing a scoring and all that you will be doing a misleading data and all. So legal counsel are the people actually who can actually validate the things before it goes to the public. You can always see that it is authentic data or not. If you want, you can get it assured by the other people like, law firms, chartered accountant firm, all are doing it. But, it's always good to give the data which is authentic, which is there. So with this background, I'll go to the Amber now. Amber, I have a different question from you. We say in India that, when we talk about environment, planet, we only have planet A, we have no planet B, and I think, we have to take care of us for the future generation and all. And environment, हम इंडिया में तो बोलते हैं धरती हमारी माँ है, frankly. Because, we have given a lot of importance to the planet, to the land, to the motherland. Now, if we talk about environment, social, governance, I know that environment includes planet, planet-related things or the land-related things, environment-related things. On the social also, we have heard Mahatma Gandhi always said that the trusteeship model, that wherever you have money which is more than your need, it's always you're a trustee for that money. Governance, we have always seen, we have a lot of examples of governance in our country itself, that how a kingdom should be ruled in Ramayana, if you really see, or if you really see C. Rajgopalacharya, our Governor General, used to say that it's not me who is running this, who is governing this country, it's Shriram. I mean, there's a lot of instances, there's a lot of examples we have, the governance, how to run a country, how to run and similarly that applies how to run a company. But my question to you, Amber, is that, do you really think that environment is much more important in ESG, or you think it's the equal weightage to be given? And why I'm saying so is because people are saying, and it's a school of thought, saying that if the environment is not there, what do social and governance will do actually? First you need to have a planet which is a clear planet. So what's your view on that actually, Amber?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here and meet all of you in physically. Yeah, first I'll touch base, what Suhana just mentioned in terms of your reporting boundaries. And I think as an in-house counsel and what you mentioned in terms of authenticity of data, that is the most critical part. And that's my personal experience because we work with a very large group. I'm working at the holding company level. We have many subsidiaries, key material subsidiaries, and we have to report at a consolidated level. Then how much you report, which other companies which will be part of your ESG reporting, whether you include everyone or you only cover the selective one. Because one of the important aspects of the new BSR reporting is that you have to define your overall architecture or the boundaries within which you are going to report, and that has to be consistently followed. So at that level, the regulators are clear in terms of the uniformity approach that you have to bring into it. The second is, of course, on the reporting parameters, numbers, qualitative. But I think the most critical part is on the leadership indicators. That is what is the most subjective part which is coming, and how do you distinguish your own company's processes, SOPs, policies, and how you distinguish merely by reporting certain compliance standard versus what are the leadership indicators you want to communicate to the market. And of course, I will not get into other areas whether this is now mandatory, investors are looking at it and all those things. But globally, there is a trend which is seen. There are funds which are being launched who are actually investing in ESG funds. I was reading somewhere about $50 billion worth of funds have been already raised. Indian mutual funds are also now coming up with certain funds which are actually investing in some of these companies which are highly rated ESG and all those things. Now, coming to the question Sameet has asked, it's a very interesting aspect to look at it in terms of how do you distinguish. Now, there are many agencies which do ratings on the ESG, but we know that there is no specific legal framework as to how to go for a ESG rating frameworks. Some rating agency, they give equal weightage, 30%. Some rating agencies does give a higher weightage on certain areas like environment. Some companies give a higher rating on social, and some give a higher weightage on the governance. So there is no set formula, but largely in my own experiences and some of the reports that I have gone through and some of the discussions that we had with some of advisors, consultants who have been engaging to help us in draft the new ESG framework for us, for the group, for at least for the financial services, is that in financial services, if you look at it, environmental aspect will be comparatively less because we are not into manufacturing. There's hardly anything that we can, there's no water pollution. There's nothing that we do on the areas of carbon emission norms. So if for us, the rating methodologies or the weightage largely should be on the governance side, because we are a financial services company, and we are holding public money, we are doing a fiduciary duty. So large focus is definitely on the governance aspect, how you look at the board, transparency, disclosures, the audit committee role, etc., etc. And of course, then of the social part, how you look at the human rights, how you look at the policies that you have in terms of equal opportunity employer, whether you look at supply chain, vendor compliance, and all those. But at the same time, if you look for some of the companies which are operating, which are heavy on the environmental side, say companies with the manufacturing, of course, those weightages will have their own impacts because they are largely dependent on the entire manufacturing cycle is dependent on the environmental, and there's an impact on the environmental. So if you look some of the ESG ratings, scores that has come up, companies which are into coal business, who are into mining, they will score very low on these aspects because of the inherent nature of the work they are doing, the business they are doing into. On these scores, on those parameters, some of the service sectors companies would do much better, right? Or similarly, a tobacco company, say ITC and all, yeah, definitely a different impact. So I think it cannot be applied uniformly in my view. Different weightage might be given for a different sector depending on which sector you are into. Similarly, on the CSR and the social aspects which are there. So. And sometimes with my own experience, we have seen that all the three E, S, and G, we look at differently, but I look at it, they are all interrelated because some of the elements are definitely connected with each other. For example, in the previous panel, we were talking about use of plastic bottles and all those, which is coming more from the environmental side, but definitely it looks at your own social angle in terms of also how you treat your employees, what kind of policies you have, how are you, and of course the governance aspect that you look at it. Similarly goes vice versa, because some of your policies which board is approving in terms of governance, it has a direct relation in terms of your social impact, in terms of your social contribution, in terms of your employee policies, and then of course the environment in which you can operate. For example, the water wastage, some of the elements which becomes very critical both for manufacturing and non-manufacturing, but of course the intensity will be different. So just to conclude is that, yeah, it's all depends on the sector which you are operating. And I think that framework and then some guidelines should be there so that a level playing field could be given and, weightage could be assigned accordingly.
Yeah, just to add a point, I think one, we are talking about reporting, which we know whether it's BRSR or SASB, there are integrated reporting, there are a lot of different concepts with respect to reporting. And with respect to ratings, I think, which is optional and some of the companies definitely want to have. There is DJSI, MSCI, Sustainalytics, and so on and so forth. And I think DJSI has an option of, choosing industries. Again, ultimately it's all the benchmarks. So it's for the company to choose based on the industry what benchmarks there are. With respect to financial services, I think some of the companies are going to scope 3 emissions. Right. So it all depends on how the the tone at the top is, that how really they want to demonstrate that. So right now there's no regulation as such per se with respect to the rating. It's largely the tone and largely the intent of the the board of the company which determines a lot of these aspects. Just want to.
I just had a thought to answer Sameet's question as well. We always say that ESG is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So while the E aspect is of course important because you need the planet to be livable, for industries to thrive and for humanity to continue, but that's a long-term, at least in my view, and a capital intensive perhaps journey. In my view, the lowest hanging fruit is governance in people, because you can easily take steps to, go on your ESG roadmap following S&G. So while E is definitely important, and like Amber mentioned, it will depend on the sector that you are in, the industry you are in, but S and G are something which are universal for all organizations. So it makes a lot of sense to start with that at least. And then, take your steps in the roadmap for your e-journey.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Suhana, I mean, completely agree. But if you see the, the agenda right now, whether it's the World Economic Forum or COP27 or, the kind of countries and companies are kind of committing to carbon neutrality, net zero and all, it seems that, E is also on the top of the radar at this point of time.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Shujath. Globally, if you really talk about, he is always on the top of it. But, if you're talking about the corporates, of course, you have to take view, in fact, which is more relevant for you because you want to do your bit. And, of course, what I understand is basically these are interconnected, actually. And if you talk about governance, say, for example, governance is not only about, transparency or good policies and all, but at the same time, what you're reporting in ESG, whether for environment or for social, is a part of governance again, because what exactly are you reporting there? Is there something misleading reports are not there or not there? So I think governance plays a lot of other role also, overarching role. So Shujath, taking further to this question, since you are almost, you were always with the sustainability company, Sustainability Limited, doing a lot of work in sustainability. So in your view, what do you think is the role of a GC exactly in-house? Like we talked about, Suhana also talked about it. So what do you think your exact role in a sustainability company as a GC, which is helping ESG, and what exactly are other roles, you
Sure, I'll take this question in 2 parts. One is with respect to, our organization, what my role is. And second is with respect to how the in-house counsels and GCs can actually really contribute. I mean, we are into a waste management and environmental services company. For that mean that in simple line, we collect all the trash across the country, whether it is, paper, plastic, electronic, or municipal solid waste or industrial waste, all kinds of waste, and try to recycle, reduce, reuse, and reclaim most of it. And ultimately ensure that whatever residues are there or disposed in a scientific manner, which does not cause harm to environment, water bodies. For example, all the hazardous industries, dispose the waste, right? So, I mean, if they don't follow the right environmental laws or the waste management laws, it can actually cause harm to the environment. So from that standpoint, we work with a lot of companies across, India, so that help them to be compliant, whether it is biomedical waste or hazardous and paper, plastic. You have EPR regulations and all of that. So basically, in my role, we try to work with the business so that we try to give us solutions to all the clients so that they are sustainable. So that's the kind of a snapshot, with respect to my role. But we're coming to the next aspect of the overall role of GC or in-house counsel. I think, if you see most of the organizations, either you have environment, health and safety function, right? Or from a social standpoint, you have a CSR function, and governance, of course, legal, compliance, ethics. And when we're talking about ESG as a concept in the organization, I think one first thing comes down is that who would be the integrator? Who would champion this, right? Mostly EHS will say, okay, I will do environment, I'll do whatever you want, right? And the CSR person will say, okay, tumko social related information, whatever I would give to you. And governance, of course, you have company secretaries or, compliance professionals. But what is a good opportunity at this point of a time is to be a champion in the company, wherein you can tell to the board, okay, of course, the boards are forming a ESG committee at a board level, and then a ESG council, which is a cross section of professionals within the same company. But what is really needed, and it's a good opportunity in my view for the general counsels or company secretaries or for the compliance officers, is to raise a hand and say, okay, I'll be the champion, I'll be the integrator for this, because the general counsels and compliance officers or company secretaries, I'm using it all together, understands the business, understands the law, understands the governance aspects of it. So I think, if you see all these three concepts, I think, it would be a good opportunity, for the in-house counsels or the GCs to start helping from the beginning with a goal formation or a charter or a proper governance model, working with the, reporting agencies, working with technology people, and basically try to be, a key orchestrator for that. And of course, whenever we raise a hand saying that, okay, I will do something extra, no, your manager or your CEO would not say no. I mean, they would definitely give the opportunity, and that really helps us to, widen, the leadership scope in the organization, more so in being a new role. That's my personal thoughts, Sameet.
Amber, you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I tend to agree, not completely, but because in your case, it may be a little different because your company is a part of in some of this implementing agencies in some areas. But if you work in a corporate, actually, the entire ESG, it's become a serious business now, and there are lot of intricacies which are involved. So I look at the general counsels, company secretaries or in-house counsels definitely have to be a part of it, and they can play a role of an aggregator. They can definitely play the role of in terms of creating framework. But I think it's a huge task to document the entire thing, especially for large groups like us, where there are many elements and there are many areas which are sitting in different pockets in different companies. Some of, for example, I can share some information, some areas which are related to us. A large part of governance and sustainability practices eliminates from the group. Then it's adopted at our level. Then we have subsidiaries and all those. So definitely you would need certain specialized champions who can drive this. It is the more to do issue on the drive. On the compliance part, definitely. For example, if you are setting up a manufacturing, getting your environmental licenses are must, water waste management is must, you have air pollution controls must, and all those things. So it's already there. You're setting up a company, so of course your audit committee, board, your shareholder activism, your stakeholder committee, and all those things there. It's already there. If you are a company to whom CSR applies and you do a lot of activities, your CSR contribution are there, and then of course your employee related well-being and human rights, equal opportunity, and all those things are definitely there. But I think you need at center level and a team which can kind of roll this out or spearhead some of these things, and on the various elements of sectoral aspects, not the sectoral, I mean on specific areas, company secretaries or general counsel definitely play a very critical role. Largely, I feel their role is very critical when it comes to reporting on governance, especially when there are questions which are being asked after the publication of your sustainability report and some of the ESG rating companies, when they post questions to you and they try to decipher what you have written. Example, if you have written a disclosure policy on, say, for example, your whistleblower, and you have given some data around it, there could be questions that how you handle that. What are the reporting mechanism? How do you have reported that to audit committee, and has any element which has come that this, or any examples which are there where there has been no victimization of any of the whistleblowers, and how your audit committee look at some of the processes. Now, one way is to look at it, you can just send the policy and all those, but it does not work. There the articulations become very critical. So I think some of their areas which has a lot of qualitative information, there definitely the role of GCs becomes very critical, that how do you write about it, how you project it, so that it's taken in a very positive manner. Another way which I can look at it is, for example, if you are a bank or you're an NBFC and you are wanting to lend to some borrowers who are, say, into mining coal. Now, how do you look at it? And that's the role of definitely the GC also comes, because ESG does not only see that what you are doing at a company level, but what are the policies you have when it comes to downstream level. So what's your board policy in terms of giving loans to some of these sectors, and what are the comforts that you are drawing? If you are a company which has a foreign investor and you have any joint venture agreement with them, or a lending consortium agreement which restricts you from granting loans to some of these companies, then how do you look at it? How you build that in your own approval metrics, in your loan policy, or on your disbursement policy, or credit assessment. So some of this becomes very critical. So at the implementation level, I think definitely these are large roles that these control functions can play. But in terms of the entire driving, I think you would require somebody who is highly specialized, and rather who can do this at a full time to get the maximum impact.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. I think, yeah. Sure.
I think just one point, apart from the implementation, I think what in-house teams and GCs can also do is just drive awareness. At least that's a reportable item under the BRSR, and where your KMPs and your board need to be trained. And I think that is something that definitely can be handled in-house, or with external advisors.
Regulatory, the listing agreement, risk committee has been authorized or nominated, rather, in terms of to manage the entire ESG framework and get the guidelines. So of course, there, how do you communicate? Like in the last risk management committee we had about just a month back, there was a detailed discussion around the same thing, and so there were a lot of questions which were being asked to me. Then I was also a little surprised that how do I answer some of these questions. So definitely when it comes to those, board do look at you, and you should be well aware in terms of how the integrated all the pillars are, in terms of how the reportings will look at it, and how much to go and how much to write. So definitely there's a big...
No, surely I think the role of GCs, the role of company secretaries is gaining a lot of importance in this area, because it is not a role of a single person. You actually have to kind of a task force to oversee this, and with the help of external help, like Suhana is saying. But the role of GC is absolutely important, or a company secretary is absolutely important, in terms of particularly when you have a risk management committee which has a mandate to mandatorily review the risk relating to ESG. Anything which is, BRSR also is to do with listed entities. So I think up to some extent, looking into the shareholder activism also, where we have seen that some of the shareholders have actually rejected the resolution because, you're not complying to the ESG norms, etc., etc. So I think the role of GC, company secretary, compliance officer is much more, what we think is, and then, and in our organization, what we have seen is, frankly, we have whenever there is a business meetings or a business plans are discussed, every business head is supposed to present one or two slides on ESG, their goals, their ambitions, how do they integrate to the businesses, so all these things are at very upper level is required. So therefore people are making ESG committees now, because that's where it is required and importance. And I think she's actually looking at me now, we are already...
So the least the legal department is to do is to move completely digital. There's no use of papers in the contracts. That's the least legal department can contribute, that how much paper we have saved. And maybe I'll just take 2 minutes to answer Shival's question. And my apologies that I interrupted you in that in terms of taking. So this is a very relevant question you have asked, Rival, and in fact, in couple of other similar sessions, we have deliberated about this thing, that how small companies or mid-sized companies would look at some of these areas in terms of reducing or not taking too much burden on these. But the way I look at it, yes, definitely when the company is a very startup stage, some of these things may not become relevant. But as you know, as these companies grow, and especially if these are well-funded companies, they are private equity investors, they are external investors, they would be looking for listing, they would be looking for divestment. So I think at that point of time, these areas become quite critical in terms of bringing larger valuations and bringing, of course, I'm not touching on the ICDR regulation and how the IPO pricing has to be determined and all those things. But when you look at what these external valuations, I think some of these things are now becoming critical. So at some stage, definitely the startup companies or new age companies has to figure and has to consider this as part of their business plan itself. And a well-governed startup, a well-governed mid-sized company, to my assessment, 15 to 20% valuation can be driven easily from a good governance practices, depending on which area they are into. And so a good ESG score will definitely look at it. And now, especially the markets are looking for these companies which are well governed and which are well funded. They look at it, they print their ESG scores also. So if you're looking, as a founder is looking for a further divestment, bringing third series, fourth series, fifth series of funding and all those, that can be a good pitch for them in terms of getting a good investor, or if they are trying to borrow at a lower cost. So definitely it's going to help. Of course, not at the start, but gradually it has to be there.
Just to add, I have seen, a new term, of course, typically in acquisitions, we know commercial due diligence, tax due diligence and all legal due diligence. But I have seen and worked with a lot of, firms and, private equity and venture capital, a specific stream of ESG diligence, and ESG diligence report is actually being considered seriously.
Some ESOP schemes I have also seen where on the one of the vesting conditions has been on the ESG matrix. I've seen recently a couple of ESOP documents where these are being also emphasized.
No, just to add, I would completely agree because, I also happen to be an M&A practitioner. So we see that a lot of these funds would require their portfolio companies, and they actually assist them as well, by giving them the software tools, etc., to report on these measures. And an ESG diligence is becoming very, very common nowadays before any investment. So I think there is some support that the funds give as well.
Thank you. I think it's a topic which we can talk day and day, years and years, frankly, but I think she's looking at me in a very different way. So any questions, frankly, before we conclude the session? Maybe we can take one or two questions. All right. Everyone is very clear about the subject then, Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks. A good panelist.